Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News broadcasting live from the Arabiya headquarters. The Iran-Israel conflict is now in its 11th day, with both sides trading strikes. The US involvement has raised tensions even more. Iran vows to respond not just to Israel, but to the US too. While the US mainland is distant, experts say its bases in nearby countries could be at risk. Questions also remain about the damage to Iran's nuclear program. Stay tuned for updates on Tel Aviv, Washington and Tehran. Now, Israel and Iran have traded heavy airstrikes earlier today, this coming just a day after the US hit 3 major Iranian nuclear sites. Explosions were heard across Tehran, with Israeli strikes reportedly targeting Fordow nuclear facility and key government sites, including the notorious Evin Prison, known for holding political prisoners and also dissidents. For more on this, I'm joined by Eylon Levy, former Israeli government spokesperson. Eylon, thank you for your time. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says it is attacking the heart of Tehran with unprecedented force. What is Israel trying to achieve with strikes on Iranian government targets in the heart of the capital today?
Hi, Leigh-Ann. Israel is trying to do 2 things in this phase of the October 7th war: to eliminate the existential threat of an Iranian nuclear bomb and keep the region safe from that, to eliminate the threat of the Iranian ballistic missile industry, but I think also to give the Iranian people a chance to take back their country from the oppressive regime that has impoverished and subjugated them for the last 50 years. Israel is not trying to replace the regime in Iran. The future of Iran is for its people to decide, and no one can replace the government there. But I think Israel does think that the only way there can be enduring peace in the region is if the regime that is committed to subjugating the region to advance its vision of death to Israel is overthrown and the Iranian people are given a real chance to take their country back. And just today, we heard the crowned prince of Iran, the exiled Reza Pahlavi, saying this is Iran's Berlin Wall moment. This is the moment the Iranian people need to stand up to the regime that has oppressed them, take back control of their country, and build a free and democratic Iran. And I think Israel will be hoping tonight that if the Iranian people rise up to try to take their country back, the world will support them, as Reza Pahlavi is demanding, and not throw them under a bus.
The world witnessed the US pull off Operation Midnight Hammer, Eylon, which hit 3 key nuclear facilities in Iran. Today, Israel has struck Fordow once again after Trump said US strikes obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. My question is, why has Israel decided to hit this target again? Was Donald Trump incorrect when he said that they were obliterated? Was this a wrong statement, Eylon?
That's a good question. I don't know the exact specifics behind Israel's tactics. I know Israel bombed the access routes to Fordow, perhaps to prevent the Iranians from getting there themselves in order to assess the damage, or maybe try to smuggle out any of the enriched uranium. But here's the key point. Israel knows that this cannot finish until the Iranian nuclear program is completely destroyed, not set back by a few weeks, not set back by a few months, beyond repair. Because otherwise the Iranian regime is going to try to rebuild that nuclear arsenal, build those nuclear weapons in order to terrorize the region. So the United States dropped those mop bombs and Israel is now trying to mop up the rest.
The nuclear watchdog is meeting today at an emergency meeting. The director warned Iran against undeclared nuclear transfer. Is Israel confident sites like Fordow, Natanz and Esfahan still have uranium? And if not, where is it?
Yeah, an emergency meeting for the IAEA, an emergency because the Iranian regime has been threatening the IAEA. Just the other day, the director of the Iranian Atomic Energy Agency saying that after the war is over, they will deal with Rafael Grossi, which is a really scary warning against a top international official. Israel will be looking into the possibility that Iran tried to smuggle the uranium out of Fordow. Let's remember why it was in Fordow in the first place. 400 kilos of enriched uranium, near weapons grade, no peaceful use for it, buried under a mountain, under reinforced concrete in an IRGC base, because this was a nuclear weapons program. This was not for peaceful civilian purposes or isotopes. This was for nuclear weapons. And the Prime Minister in Israel has indicated Israel has intelligence about what Iran has done with it. And it will be important as Israel continues to destroy the Iranian nuclear program to make sure that that uranium is out of the hands of the regime so they cannot try to use it to build a dirty bomb.
Israel clearly, Eylon, didn't have the military arsenal to eliminate Iran's nuclear facilities on its own. That was clear. The US was there to help. What Benjamin Netanyahu clearly started, but Trump promised when he was elected there would be no more forever wars. Is Israel confident the US will stand by them if Iran hits back? Iran is warning that they are ready to do this, and what is Israel prepared for?
First of all, I'm not sure that Israel couldn't have handled Fordow by itself. Certainly,
no, you couldn't have, because you didn't have the bunker buster bombs. You needed those from the US in order to penetrate Fordow. That couldn't have happened.
Well, that was the conventional wisdom, and for what it's worth, Israel was hinting that it had some technological surprises up its sleeve, but it doesn't matter because that's history now, and the US has already destroyed Fordow because the American administration understood the threat that Iranian nuclear weapons posed to the United States. But the Iranian regime is already retaliating. They have fired over 500 ballistic missiles at Israel in the space of the last week. They hit a hospital. They hit a cancer research center. They hit people's homes. They hit a clinic for disabled children. They are targeting civilian areas in Israel. And the United States is helping Israel to shoot down those missiles. But here is the critical point. President Trump is not starting a war now. He's helping to finish a war. By dealing the death blow to the Iranian nuclear program, the president is helping to bring to an end the war of aggression that the Iranian regime has already been waging for the last 2 years through its proxy armies. Proxy armies that, by the way, are not willing to fight for the Iranian regime anymore. Who could have imagined in the Middle East that Iran's nuclear facilities would be under attack, and even Hezbollah, an army built by the Revolutionary Guards to protect the Islamic regime, would come to the regime's defense. So the Iranian regime finds itself more isolated than ever before, weaker than ever before, and Israel is hoping that when it finishes demolishing the nuclear program and the ballistic missile program, we can draw a line under this war that the Iranian regime began.
So Tehran is warning the US, Israel and UK will bear full responsibility for the attacks. Has Israel just dragged the rest of the world into a forever conflict? We've seen things like this happen before. If you think of Iraq back in 2003, this is not something that is one and done, it appears to be.
Yeah, I hear those concerns, but what Israel has done now has been to save the world from the possibility of the world's most dangerous regime getting the world's most dangerous weapons. The Iranian regime already had 400 kilos of near weapons-grade uranium, and they were a whisker away from being able to weaponize it. If Israel did not act now, we could have woken up tomorrow to find it was too late to stop the Iranian regime. And those countries in the Middle East that have been so bravely trying to throw off the shackles of Iranian oppression, Lebanon, Syria, would find themselves under Iran's boot again. And the countries that were looking forward to peace and normalization would have been looking over their shoulder to make sure that the Iranian regime wasn't there. President Trump, I think, acted out of his own understanding of America's national interest. And that is that the Iranian regime, which chants not only death to Israel, but also death to America, cannot be allowed to possess weapons of mass destruction. And an Iranian regime, a totalitarian dictatorship that opposes the move of the Middle East towards more peace and normalization, cannot be allowed to possess nuclear weapons. That's an independent assessment of the United States' independent national interest, quite apart from whether it's good for Israel.
Eylon Levy, former Israeli government spokesperson, thank you for your thoughts. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Always good to speak, Leigh-Ann.
Now, with me in the studio today is Arabiya's military and strategy analyst and, of course, friend of the show and friend of mine, Riad Kahwaji. Riad, wow, that was one busy weekend. I think a lot of us woke up to that news yesterday that the US had struck those sites in Iran. So now 11th day of the conflict. But is there a change right now? Because I asked Eylon Levy this. Israel has now hit government sites inside Tehran, including the Evin Prison. Is this in order to have a regime change or to force Iran to come to the table for negotiations?
First, it was the long anticipated. It was, we heard all these warnings from President Trump, mixed messaging, and at the end, it finally happened. It's clear that afterwards, the message here is that the nuclear issue, the nuclear facilities have been destroyed. That's the message from the US, and therefore, Iran now has to come forward to the table and accept the terms that there will be no enrichment, zero enrichment, and to move forward from that point onward. If not, if Iran continues to engage and even retaliates, then there will be an escalation and the price would be higher. The terms would be now beyond just a nuclear issue. It will include other things, and it could place the regime in a peril.
Absolutely. You know, that's my next question. The world is now really bracing, Riad, for Tehran's response, which we haven't seen yet. With an official warning, it could hit US forces within 48 hours. I know this is a difficult question to answer, but what can the world expect?
If Iran, it's clear, the priority for Iran is regime survival. And at the same time, the Iranians would want to look that they have saved face somehow in this big US strike on them. For one, if they want to do something limited just to save face, we could see the Iranians possibly fire few missiles against, let's say, US airbase in Qatar. Not hit anything serious, not inflict any casualties, maybe throw a few missiles around the base over there, just to show that they have retaliated. Something similar to what they did after the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani and during President Trump's first term, when they fired at the US airbase in Iraq. No casualties, nothing was hardly damaged. And for the Iranians, this was enough, you know, that they have retaliated. We could see something similar, and it's enough. Or if they want to do something bigger and start firing at US bases in Bahrain, Qatar, and other places, then and inflict damage, this is going to invite a bigger US retaliation, which could definitely jeopardize the future of the regime in a serious way. It's a possibility, but knowing the Iranian regime and their priority for survival, I would say they would go for the first option.
For the symbolic option, possibly.
Symbolic option.
Riad Kahwaji, thank you so much. Stay there and I'll be right back with you. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has once again condemned the Israeli and US strikes on his country, calling them completely illegitimate and a violation of international law. He made the remarks during a visit to Moscow, where he met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Araghchi thanked President Putin for condemning the attacks and also for standing with Iran.
The level of escalation is growing due to the unjustified attacks by the Israeli regime and then the US. These aggressive actions by Israel and the US are completely illegitimate and violate international rules and international norms. We thank Russia for its correct and solid stances in condemning the attacks. Russia today is on the right side of the story and international law.
For more on this, I'm joined by Nizar Farsakh, lecturer of international affairs at Georgetown University. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time. For decades, the US and Iran have carefully avoided crossing a dangerous red line into a direct military confrontation. Why do you think President Trump made the decision he did over the weekend to go into Iran?
Well, just a correction. I'm in George Washington, not Georgetown. Don't get me in trouble with the school. The U.S. And Iran have played this tug of war, basically on who has a higher or upper hand in the region. The Trump administration now decided to attack because of the pressure from the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu and the Israeli government would have lost the war if there is no regime change. Their goal is regime change, while for the Americans, they are not desperate for regime change. So I think Trump went ahead with this attack. One, of course, is to be ahead of the curve and show that it is the U.S. that is the strong party that decides peace and war. That's the message for the Israelis, of course, and for the Iranians to show them that the U.S. is not afraid of using its power, and it does believe that it can do this assault without worrying about getting dragged into a prolonged war. So it's basically marksmanship.
Today, Israel has struck government facilities inside Tehran, like Evin Prison. Is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu trying to force Iran into submission?
He is. So by decapitating the majority of the IRGC, the leadership, he was signaling to the Iranians that I could do the same with the political echelon. And indicating that we could destroy the regime, so you better negotiate. And I think the attack on the prison is because the prison is notorious for torture, and it's the way the regime keeps control of their people. They're signaling that we can, the Israelis that is, that they are encouraging the Iranians to revolt against the regime. And it's unclear if a revolution or an uprising would happen under such situations as war. It could be like Milosevic in Serbia, where there is a concerted and organized civil society that pushed Milosevic out because of the war. I don't see that in Iran today. I think the regime is still in way too much control, and the Iranian people, unfortunately, do not have sufficient organizing power to be able to topple the regime, unless of course there is a coup from inside the military, or specifically from inside the IRGC, which is possible.
So let's just talk a little bit about regime change there, because Donald Trump actually hinted at that today on social media. I was just speaking to Eylon Levy there, who was a former Israeli government spokesperson. But my concern when it comes to the regime and what a lot of people are saying is who comes next. If there is a regime change and there is a revolution, what next, though, for Iran? Who could possibly take over that massive vacuum of power?
Exactly, and this is what American experts and politicians are worried about. They would rather a devil they know for better or worse, they can come to an agreement with this regime. It is a rational actor that is, bartering, or maybe let's say pushing and pulling, depending on what it can achieve. But for the Israelis, they would prefer that there is a regime change and that there be chaos in Iran, and maybe a situation like Syria or Iraq, which it might be expedient, but definitely bad for Israel in the long run. And unfortunately, this Israeli government, and specifically this prime minister, has proved time and time and again that he's not strategic, he's very tactical, and does not see beyond a few months ahead. And this is unfortunately going to come at the expense of the Israeli people.
So the world witnessed the US pull off Operation Midnight Hammer, which hit 3 key nuclear facilities in Iran. Today, Israel has struck for dough again after Trump said US strikes obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. Was Trump right to call a win so soon and be so brazen about it? Do we know if they've realistically obliterated these sites?
It's highly unlikely that they obliterated it. They caused damage, and if the Iranians are correct in having removed the majority of the materials, then there was only damage to structure. However, I think when Trump attacked, I think he was hoping that the attack would be cause such a scare for the regime that they would actually come with their tail between their legs and beg for negotiation. That didn't happen, and therefore Israel is pushing forward, trying to destroy as much as possible, because everybody knows that through attacks alone, you can only delay the nuclear program, you cannot destroy the program. And if the program is not destroyed, then Israel loses. And that's why the only win for Israel is if it manages to change the regime. And for Iran, or this Iranian regime, their win is simply surviving. If they survive this war and stay intact, then they would have won.
Nizar Farsakh, lecturer of international affairs at Georgetown University. I hope I got that right this time. Thank you so much. So Al-Arabiya's Riad Kahwaji is back with us in the studio. I thought it was really interesting what our guest before us was just saying, that basically a win for Iran right now is the fact that the regime could survive. Do you agree with that?
Depends on what you call a win. I mean, for the regime, if war was to end tomorrow, let's say there's a ceasefire tomorrow, and it's still, the leader, supreme leader is still there, the government is still there. For them, possibly this could be a win. However, what about the repercussions? What are the terms of a ceasefire? Is it just, okay, the nuclear program is destroyed, there is a deal that there is no enrichment, and life would go on as normal? Or will the ceasefire agreement include bigger concessions from Iran, and how this would impact the regime? It's not going to be, I don't see an easy win for the regime. I think the regime is looking for a way out where it can come out with a narrative that can sell to its people that it survived and came out victorious. That's what the regime, such a regime, usually looks for.
Yeah.
Right now, as things look, things are not really even as well. And also, what Trump wants and what Netanyahu wants, not necessarily the same thing. So what the US could see as a good way out might not be the same for Israel. So here we have another dilemma. So it is more than one party involved in this conflict. And I think for now, the regime is still looking for a good way out of this. And there doesn't seem to be a win-win situation under the current conditions.
So that brings me to Iran's allies. So we know Iran's foreign minister today has been in Moscow. He's been meeting President Vladimir Putin, who has condemned the strikes on Iran. He says that he's there for Iran. He hasn't offered concrete support. But could Putin be the mediator in here? Is he the piece that we need to bring the US and Iran together, possibly?
It's possible. Well, I don't know what role President Putin could play in this. There are more than one mediator, likely mediator over here. We could have the Omanis again. We could have the Chinese here. But in such a conflict, I think this is where you would see a role for a mediator that could be accepted by both sides. I don't think the US would want to see Russia get a lot of benefit in such a mediation. Same for the Chinese. And again, Iran has people or has countries condemning, but none of them is coming with an actual support, military or anything tangible. So until now, we can say Iran's pretty much alone, into dealing with this. And also, they seem to have some command leadership issue based on reports. The supreme leader is in hiding, and every time they want to make a decision, they have to reach him, and reaching him is not possible because he apparently disconnected with everything electronic and so forth, just to stay safe. And this is delaying any action and reaction from the Iranian side, and definitely is impacting Iran's moves, even the diplomatic ones.
And at such a critical time, Riad Kahwaji, thank you so much. Stay with us and I'll be back with you. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. At least 7 people have been killed and several injured in an overnight Russian missile and drone attack in Kyiv. Rescue workers pulled bodies from the rubble of an apartment block located less than a kilometre away from the US Embassy. The strike comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Britain to discuss defence. Now, at least 25 people have been killed and 63 others wounded in a suicide attack at a church in Damascus. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said it was the first suicide attack inside a church in Syria since the war erupted in 2011. The Ministry of the Interior has accused ISIS of the bombing. Now, NATO allies have agreed to boost its defence spending to 5% of their gross domestic product by 2035. The increase is up from a current goal of 2%. The budget target, which was demanded by President Donald Trump, will be formally signed off when members meet in The Hague tomorrow. And finally, Tesla rolled out robo-taxis in Austin, Texas this weekend. On a post on its X account, Tesla said its robo-taxi service increased safety for vulnerable road users, such as pedestrians and also cyclists. The riders are offered for a flat fee of $4.20 for customers. Now let's take a look at the top business news. Oil prices touched a 5-month high before turning negative and then recovering as fears grew over what the conflict in the Middle East could mean for supplies. Traders are waiting to see what Iran does next after the US and it's hit its key nuclear facilities. Media reports say Iran's parliament has approved a move to close the Strait of Hormuz. Brent and WTI are both up over 1% today in a volatile trading environment. Gold has edged higher on Monday as Iran and Israel tensions lifted safe haven demand. However, those gains were limited by a US stronger dollar, which is up 0.6% against its peers. Markets are closely watching for any Iranian response to US strikes on its nuclear sites. Turning to the sports news now, when Kevin Durant has ended speculation about his future by joining Houston Rockets from the Phoenix Suns. The Rockets are reportedly giving up Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green and 6 future picks, including the number 10 selection in Wednesday's opening round of this year's draft. For his career, the 6'11" forward is averaging 27.2 points and 7 rebounds per game. And finally, Kirsty Coventry has officially become the president of the International Olympic Committee following a former handover on Monday morning. The Zimbabwean, a 7-time Olympic medalist, becomes the first woman and first African to occupy the post, widely considered the most powerful role in sport. Coventry, who is 41 years old, is actually the youngest IOC president. As Iran warns the US will pay a price for strikes on its nuclear sites, President Trump has alluded to the possibility of regime change in a post on Truth Social. He wrote, "If the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, then why would there be a regime change?" His remarks came after other top US officials stressed that toppling Iran's leaders was not the United States' aim. I just want to bring you some breaking news that we're getting across the wires. There have been sounds of several explosions were heard over the capital in Qatar, that's Doha. That's according to a Reuters report, is what a witness has said on Monday. And this comes following Tehran's threats to retaliate against US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Following the United States' involvement in the conflict, concerns are growing that Iran could retaliate by targeting American bases nearby. Now, one key site is the Al Deed Air Base in Qatar, which is home to around 10,000 US troops. Today, the US Embassy in Doha urged Americans to shelter in place. Qatar later said the security situation remains stable. However, we did get those breaking news lines that there has been some explosions heard over Doha. I'm now joined by Dr. Hamid AlKifaey, author and writer on the Middle East. Thank you so much for joining us. A pleasure to have you on the show. So if Iran does indeed strike US bases, would that serve its strategic interests or backfire, especially given that some Gulf leaders condemned Israel's strikes on Iran?
Will certainly backfire. I think if Iran decides to attack American bases, this is suicidal on Iran's part. Because the United States will not sit back and just watch. It's going to hit back and hit hard. So I don't know. I doubt if there is such a move on the part of Iran, but anything could happen. The Iranians would like to show their people that they are in a position to retaliate. They are strong. But it's unlikely. I just cannot believe that they would dare to do such a thing.
I just want to get your reaction to some news that we're getting out now. It says there's a credible threat of an Iranian missile attack on a US-run airbase in Qatar. That's according to the BBC and Iraq, apparently. And Qatar has temporarily closed its airspace, and US and UK citizens have been advised to shelter in place. What is your reaction to this news?
But this news is unconfirmed, so I cannot really comment on unconfirmed reports. I don't think the Iranians would dare to attack American targets, American bases in Iraq or in Qatar, because they enjoy good relations with Iraq and with Qatar, especially with Iraq and Qatar. So it's highly unlikely, but if they do, there will be consequences from the Americans, from the Qataris, from the Iraqis. So it is very dangerous for them to undertake such an action.
Okay, I'm just getting that news from the BBC and also Reuters, but let's move on. President Trump has issued a warning regarding oil prices. Could we see Iran target the Strait of Hormuz and effectively holding the world to ransom?
I also cannot see how Iran would do that. I mean, this will attract American action because this affects all countries of the world. Because it will raise oil prices, and that affects life in the West and in other countries, even in China, an ally of Iran, or supposedly ally of Iran. So this is also, it cannot be ruled out, but Iran did threaten to close the Strait of Hormuz, but it is really also a very bold move for Iran to do, and I don't think it will.
Doctor, what do you think Iran could do in retaliation? They are warning of retaliation. What are the possibilities? You say you can't see them striking US air bases, despite reports we're getting in now from Qatar, and also closing the Strait of Hormuz. So what is Iran's options?
Iran has actually very limited options. Iran wants this war to end as soon as possible, and it will keep firing missiles on Israel if Israel keeps attacking Iran. So that's for sure. But how long for? Iran doesn't have a lot of missiles, and all its weapon factories and other bases have been attacked and destroyed by Israel. So it is very difficult time for Iran. Iran is cornered, and it wishes to end the war as much, more than any other party to this war. But it will, for the time being, I think it will keep attacking Israel, it will keep firing missiles. But that's all it could do. It doesn't want to widen this war because it will lose. I mean, it is losing as it is now. But if it widens the war, it will attract more actions from the Americans and from the Israelis.
Dr. Hamid AlKifaey, author and writer on the Middle East. A pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. So I just want to bring you a little bit more breaking news. We're getting air defense system activated in US bases in Qatar, Bahrain and Kuwait. And that's according to military sources who have been speaking to the Reuters news agency. There we are. Riad, I just want to go through some of what we're getting breaking news. Explosions have been in Qatar after a credible threat against a US airbase in the country. So we are getting this news through right now while you are on air with me. So explosions heard over Qatari capital Qatar. Qatar closed airspace after US and UK warning to its citizens. What's the reaction?
Well, depends on the outcome. First, we'll see how large-scale is the attack. Would the U.S. be able to intercept all these missiles? Were these missiles fired at, empty grounds, not aiming at crucial targets, just to show, to save face, to show that they have retaliated? Second, if they were to hit anything, how the U.S. would react? Even if they don't hit anything, the Iranians could be hoping to repeat what they did after the killing of Soleimani. So the question here, how would Washington react? Would this time President Trump say, fine, nothing was damaged, no casualties, we can move on. Or he would say, no, I'm not going to take it, we're going to have to hit back. So unfortunately, since October 7, 2023, the Iranians have been miscalculating one move after the other. Could this retaliation be another miscalculation, or a very well calculated with advanced warning provided to the Americans that we are about to do something so that they will avoid any casualties?
So Riad, we're just seeing live pictures now, right now on our screen. So, and that is from, if I'm correct, the airbase in Qatar. And that is Iranian missile strikes on air bases in Qatar. Riad and I have been talking about that now. And let me just bring you up to date with what we're hearing. Explosions heard over Qatari capital Doha. That's according to reports on the news wires. We are now seeing those live pictures come in, if you can see that, over the Qatar US airbase. And it's after a credible threat from Iran against US bases in the country. We also know earlier Qatar closed airspace after US and UK warning to the citizens. And Riad and I, he's still in the studio with me, live picture there right on our screen. Riad, we are seeing those Iranian strikes come in. I mean, it's happened quite quickly, hasn't it? We know that the US obviously hit those nuclear facilities yesterday, Iran striking today. Those live pictures are on air. Is this an escalation? Will the US view this as an escalation?
Oh, well, supposedly, yes. If you want to go by the words of President Trump and the US officials warning of any retaliation, yes, we would say this is an escalation. But again, this depends here on, does the US really want to go all the way in? Because it has, if the US finds this to be unacceptable, we don't know the outcome yet. Was there any casualties? Was there any hits? Was the US air defense able to intercept all the missiles? So we need to get all this data to be able to analyze it. But if there were casualties, definitely the US would retaliate. If there was nothing, minor damage, it's a possibility that the US would let this go to avoid escalation and getting more involved in this conflict.
Riad, and I think a lot of people watching the show are going to be thinking this, like I'm thinking it right now. How dangerous is it at time for the Middle East right now, for people living in Qatar, for people living in the UAE where there are US military bases? Are we at a flashpoint in this crisis?
Well, this is what we've been warning of for years, that, with the way things were building up between Iran and its neighbors, and especially Israel, that we were facing the possibility of a large-scale regional war, where it would start off between Israel and Iran, and then it could suck in other players. And this is where we stand right now. It is happening, and we could see things escalate very quickly from this point onwards. Or we could see a de-escalation with one party saying, I'm not going to retaliate now, I'm going to let this go, because possibly there is no damage and no casualties. So we'll find out in the next few hours.
Oh, Riad Kahwaji, thank you so much. Yes, I think there is a lot of fear and concern in the region following that breaking news. Thank you so much for joining me on the programme. Al Arabiya's military and strategy analyst, and of course, friend of the show, Riad Kahwaji. Now, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has urged China to convince Iran not to close the Strait of Hormuz. The Chinese Foreign Ministry confirmed that the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had a phone call with his Iranian counterpart in wake of the strikes, but refused to confirm whether Beijing urged Tehran to keep that vital maritime transit route open. Our Asia correspondent Camille Nadilek sent us the latest from Hong Kong.
The calculation that the United States is making here is that economic influence translates into geopolitical influence. Now, it is true that China and Iran do have close economic ties. China imports almost all of Iran's sanctioned oil, and there are multiple reports that then get paid for in renminbi. So Iranians then have no choice but to buy Chinese products. But publicly, on the global stage, China maintains a position of non-interference. And when asked during the Chinese Foreign Ministry press briefing earlier, a spokesperson was very reticent to give any details about a phone call between the two foreign ministers of Iran and China. Let's take a listen.
The Persian Gulf and its surrounding waters are vital channels for international goods and energy trade. Maintaining security and stability in this region is in the common interest of the international community.
Something like 45% of China's oil imports pass through that strategic maritime chokehold for the oil industry. And that then goes to refineries in China and then used to supply domestic demand for fuel and other essential products used for the Chinese economy. Eventually, further downstream, that would lead to additional costs for manufacturers, and manufacturers presumably would then pass those costs on to consumers like the United States. So while Marco Rubio says that it's not the United States that will be the most impacted if the strait were to close, eventually that cost would be passed on to the US.
And I just want to reiterate some of that breaking news that we did bring you earlier in the show. Explosions have been heard in Qatar, and that's after a credible threat against a US base in the country. We'll be waiting to get more news on that. As you can see that we have the live pictures on our screen, US airbase targeted by Iran as explosions have been heard in Qatar, and that's within the last 15 minutes or so. We have received those pictures. If you have a look, it's missile strikes, and the destination of those strikes has been Qatar, from what we're hearing, and it's launched towards the bases, and more on that as we get any news in. And that's all from us on W News. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora will be coming up next. Plus, of course, we'll be back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.